Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depends upon where you are in this world. Where I'm at is in the training library at the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Training Center in Miami, Florida. It's a tepid, about 100 degrees with the heat and humidity index today, so I'm happy to be sitting at least temporarily in the air conditioning. I want to thank our sponsor. That would be Key Hose. That's keyhose.com. And I am going to throw down a gauntlet and encourage you to take the Key Challenge. That's what we're going to call it, the Key Challenge. Get some of this hose from Key or a vendor and try to kink it. Take it out, tie knots in it. Although I don't love the Cleveland load, I don't share the infatuation that most of the fire service seems to have with the Cleveland load. It is a test of the kink resistance of Key hose, particularly their high-end combat ready. Try to kink this hose. You will be unsuccessful. These pictures were taken at a static pressure of no greater than 60 psi. It was directly off of a hydrant. No kinks. Additionally, we tried out. This one's going to be tough to see, fellas and ladies. This is their prototype 2.25 inch True ID hose. If you're looking for something between 1.75 and 2.5, say for an attack line or standpipe operations, you need to look at this. You need to look at the True ID 2.25. Okay, here's the nostalgia throwback retro look. If you'll notice, this is my brother, our brother, Ralph Carrillo, and he's dressed up for the drill. Now, he doesn't wear that at fires, but that is Ralph. He's got an old Chicago coat on, pull-down boots, and in his helmet. So, but he is a fireman's fireman. So, our topic today is going to be portable fire extinguishers. And we're going to, I've been warned about spending too much time on introduction, except we do have a special guest with us today. And I think somebody that is going to bring a lot to the table because of his involvement in both municipal, but more important than that for today, industrial firefighting. Ron, can you tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me on the Humpday Hangout today. Well, I was born at a very early age, as you know, and I'm working on 44 years in the fire service. I had 20 years in industry, and the rest has been municipal service. But the time in industry is where I really got my sea legs in fire protection and systems and all that kind of stuff. Other than that, I've been to college many times, and as you know, I'm a regular at FDIC. Fire engineering just knocked out my latest project, Fire Officer's Guide to Occupational Safety and Health, which I'm pretty proud of. And merrily we roll along. You know, that's what else can I tell you?
And I did ask you to participate, Ron, because of your background in industry. And would you agree that, generally speaking, your plant fire brigade folks, the emergency response team folks, are way more proficient with the use of portable fire extinguishers than municipal firefighters that hardly receive, if any training, very little training on the use of portable fire extinguishers. The other reason I asked you to come on today is you wrote an excellent article several years ago on the rating system. You get a fire extinguisher that says 2A 10BC. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's capable of putting out 10 square feet of a flammable liquid. And a lot of that, I understand, Ron, has to do with the capability of the user. Would that be correct?
Yeah, and you're right on both accounts. When I was in industry, I worked for Merck Pharmaceutical. I worked at the what we used to call the flagship facility in New Jersey. It was a 350-acre bulk chemical and research R&D site with about 7,000 employees. It was a small city, and we had 4,000 portables in the facility. And I will tell you that not only did we work out our industrial fire department on portables, our employees as well. and 95% of the fires that broke out in that facility were extinguished with a portable fire extinguisher. And it's interesting to me because where I work currently, I live in New York, just north of the city, Bill, and I sneak over the line every day into Connecticut, where I'm working now. And the Connecticut code has changed, where it's okay to take the portables out of the buildings. They only in the buildings you can only have to have them in a high hazard location, like the boiler room, the machine room. But other than that, in the hallways and all that stuff, it's okay to pull them out. They're reversing that now. I think it's been like that a couple of years, and that kind of boggled me for a while, because first aid fire appliances anywhere, to me, that's the first line of defense, to get in. And that's what it was for us. And then so we had lots of fires in industry, but with the right training and the right knowledge and having the extinguishers at arm's length, so to speak, it did the trick for us. I mean, the guys would pull up and start stretching the line. By the time they did that, the fire was out with one or maybe two portables. So it works. It absolutely works.
Sam Hiddle from Wichita, Kansas. By the way, Sam, I met a friend of yours who is here teaching our fire recruits hazardous materials. We have a wonderful program with the International Association of Firefighters. Today on our grounds, our recruits are being trained by a fire officer from Phoenix, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado. And this is part of a cooperative with the International Association of Firefighters. And I think it is wonderful to give our recruits exposure to people on departments, different parts of the country. Now, ours is kind of a sought-after destination here in the winter months. This time of year, it's not so sought after. But Sam, in our communication correspondence before this hangout, just tell briefly who you are, and can you give your experience? You said you fought a metal fire with, I'm assuming, a Class D extinguisher. Could you expand on that and introduce yourself, Sam?
What it was a manufacturing, and we had a good fire, and it had filled up the facility, a good sized facility. We had 2.5 inch lines in service, and we just weren't making progress. The battalion chief, who was interior, noticed with the thermal imager that when we were getting water on it, we were actually making things worse. So we ended up going to a dry chem extinguishers, and we emptied every rig that had responded to that 2-alarm fire. And I know you're not supposed to use dry chem, and Ron probably has an explanation as to why. But not having Class D and knowing water didn't work, that's what we resorted to, and we were able to get the metal shaving fire under control.
I'm wondering out loud, it was the lubricating oil that was burning, and that's why you put it out. Ron, what do you think? Do you think that's what it was? Is that why the dry chemical?
Yeah, absolutely, because dry chemical will not work on burning metals. You got to use a Class D extinguisher. You got to use dry powder. And I know it gets confusing, dry chemical, dry powder.
Yes.
And dry chemical is a powder, so it gets confusing sometimes. But the Class D dry powders are specifically made to put out metal fires. So they probably had cutting oil on the floor around the shavings and got it out with the dry chem. And they're not interchangeable. You can't use dry powder on a flammable liquid, and you can't use dry chemical on a burning metal. They're not compatible with each other.
Right.
It's not.
Captain Mike Dugan, retired from FDNY. You want to tell us a little bit just briefly about yourself and a memorable experience with extinguishers? And of course, we all want to know. We're always curious because we're all closet FDNY buffs at heart. What does FDNY do? How do they train their people? What kind of extinguishers do they carry on their apparatus? So if you could kind of follow up on my questions, Mike.
Sure. Well, we always carry a can, 2.5 gallons of water. We also always carry a foam extinguisher, which is we bring that to basement fires, oil burners in the heating season. And we have a Purple K on the rig. One of my I've used the Purple K a couple of times, but one of my memorables was a car fire. It was a stolen car in Brooklyn as a lieutenant. It was parked on a hill, and they had set it on fire. And whether it was stolen or just they didn't want it anymore, back in the day, that's what they used to do. But we had it had the electronic ignition, and the fuel line was cut, and it was feeding the fire, and it was going down the block. And we transmitted an all hands for a car fire, which was unheard of back in the day. And the chief comes up and he's like, "What the hell?" And he looks down the block and he's like, "Holy crap." Because we had like 6 other cars going because it was a flowing gas fire. We ended up using Purple K with this, and we needed the other truck company's Purple K to extinguish it out completely. Now, I have seen metal fires only in high-end vehicles, but again, we have Purple K units. We have whole units that will expand, because one other time at a fire when I was a young fireman, we had a fire in the sewage treatment plant in Manhattan, downstairs in like the electronics room with all the stuff doing all that. And they were sending 2 guys down at a time with dry chemical extinguishers to try to put this out because we couldn't use any water. And they had a 3rd alarm assignment for extinguishers and people. So again, you have to know your capabilities, and sometimes you got to know your resources. Like Sam said, getting people who work in the industry near you who will be willing to back you up at these things is vitally important.
It's Mike, Jason Hovelman, Chief Hovelman, Chief of Florissant Valley Fire Protection District. Would you like to tell a little bit about yourself and your experiences with extinguishers? He stepped away. Well, he's running the fire department. Mike, or
use your words.
Ron, would you agree with this statement? And you can disagree if you don't. You really don't know how to operate a extinguisher and know your capabilities until you have fought a fire with an extinguisher that you cannot extinguish. In other words, sometimes I wonder if we're doing the public a disservice. You got a little pan of a little bit of a flame of kerosene or something burning on water, and poof, the fire's out. And I think it gives firefighters and civilians kind of a false sense of capability until you get into something like a big pit like we used to do years ago. But we don't do that with our recruits anymore.
Well, the pit fires are environmentally prohibitive. So,
Okay.
and when I worked in New Jersey, we had a fire academy in South Jersey in Burlington County that had the greatest pit in the world. And then after a while, they wouldn't let us do it anymore. We burned a lot of propane then and then after, a ton of propane because it's a lot cleaner. The guys were able to get in and feel some heat and try to kind of make a difference. But it's like anything else in the fire service. It takes training. It's no different from throwing ladders or stretching lines or doing whatever else we do. It's no different than that. You have to go practice it and then know, like anything else, what you can't do versus what you can do. It's like anything else, because you can get in trouble. You can really get in trouble thinking you have enough punch in that can, and then it wasn't enough punch, and all of a sudden you're faced with something bad. Just as a side note for the gentleman who's orchestrating this Humpday Hangout, I'm looking at 3 pictures on the screen of Mike, Jason, and Sam, and they got microphones with slashes through them. I can't hear any of the guys right now. If our technology guy can help us with that, I couldn't hear Mike's dissertation at all before the last time he spoke.
Okay, yeah, because I do see. Okay, Mike, your mic is not muted anymore, and Jason, your mic is still muted. If you want to come off and talk a little bit about yourself and extinguishers.
Yeah. Jason Hovelman, Fire Chief with the Florissant Valley Fire Protection District, and I've got limited experience at all with metal fires, but we did in my volunteer department for years carry Purple K extinguishers, mostly for car fires is where we use them the most. And what we found was one Purple K extinguisher typically wasn't enough to really do what we needed to do.
Agreed. Now, Ron Cannerman, I sent some questions, and what do you find works best for the Class B fires? Ordinary dry chemical, which is sodium bicarbonate, monoammonium phosphate, which is the ABC, or potassium bicarbonate, which is the Purple K, or unless you're in the Navy, then you call it PKP, if I recall from my Navy buddies. It is, Ron, it is PK. That's what they call it in the Navy. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. They called it because it's PK, so it's purple K. It's really what
Yeah.
it is. And they just put a dye in it to make it look pretty. The purple doesn't have anything to do with putting the fire out. But
really?
Yeah, but BC Dry Chem, as long as it's got that BC rating or the B rating all by itself, nothing will punch a flammable liquid fire better than just a straight BC. Other than the portables I had around the plant, I had 150 pound units on wheels, and you want to put out a flammable liquid fire on a large facility, that's the way to do it. And I know they have them at the airports and all those places. That's got, I think it was rated like 180 BC, where like a small port will be 20 BC. So it had the most spectacular punch you'd ever see in your life on a flammable liquid fire. We also mixed BC Dry Chem with water, and we taught our industrial firefighters, if you can't get too close because of heat, okay, you have a 30 or 40 degree fog pattern, and you're going onto this tank or flammable liquid to keep it cool. And you could take that nozzle of that portable and stick it right in the middle. We'd have a guy with a gloved hand go right in the middle of the 30 or 40 degree fog and discharge the dry chem in the center of the cone, so to speak. And the water would carry the dry chemical into the fire and put the fire out. So we used to do different things like that to be more effective.
Ron, we kind of adapted this idea from marine firefighting. This is we call it our hockey stick. We use it on basement fires to reach down into window wells, but without the nozzle on. Actually, with the nozzle on it. What we can do is put this up underneath a car and cool the underside of the car, cool the fuel system to lower the vapor pressure in the fuel tank. And then, when the moment is right, then we shoot the dry chemical through it. And here we're actually using foam on this one. It reaches up and it gets it up underneath there. And I believe we're using foam in this one too. So you don't have to get down on your knees and try to direct the stream up. And it's worked out real well for us. It's not an original idea. I learned it in a marine firefighting class where they do that with the old Navy fog applicators, where you'll take and you shoot dry chemical through it.
Right.
It's something that we use. In fact, I think I've got one here. I'll look at it later. Here, we're actually using one here with the fog nozzle attached. Now, you really cut back on the velocity, but if you didn't have time to change the nozzle out, you could just shoot it through there.
Sure.
And we had one. I had one here that was a garbage truck, and it had the hydraulic oil going in it. Here they are. And they were pretty successful using it with the garbage truck for a pressurized hydraulic fluid. Okay, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. I'm going to be the fly in the punch bowl. Okay? Fire extinguishers suck because in Miami-Dade County, when I go to a fire in a business that's out of control, there's 15 friggin' extinguishers laying there on them sides that the employees used before they called the fire department. Most notably, we had a very small fire in a storage room in an electrical panel in some cardboard boxes on a very windy day. Now, these Einsteins used every fire extinguisher that they could find until the fire got to the point where they couldn't take the smoke anymore. Then they went outside, and in order to direct their streams, they smashed the windows on the windward side, and by the time we got there, it was a fourth alarm. And that is not fires in junkyards. Same thing. They will use every friggin' extinguisher. So maybe there is a method to the madness, Ron, for taking fire extinguishers out of public buildings. I mean, I'm just saying.
I understand, and there's a fine line between the amount of times that you had your fourth alarm and the amount of thousands of times that there was no fourth alarm.
I hear you, brother.
Someone picked up a portable and used it the right way, and at the same time, we trained our employees the same way. If you have to pull a portable off of a hook in a building, someone needs to be dialing 911 at the same exact time. It has to be simultaneous. If you're
There
going
you
to use
go.
one, if you're going to pull an extinguisher, you got to be calling 911 at the same time. So it's a matter of training, discipline, all that. And we've had that. We pulled up to, we had a couple of fires, more than a couple, but we used to burn up a lab about 6 or 8 times a year. And we'd get down the hallway with a line, and there were 10 portables laying in the hole. And then we used to tell our employees, for every portable extinguisher you use past one, we're going to charge you, take it out of your pay to recharge those extinguishers. We used to threaten them with that. We never did it. But trying to make the point where if you use one and it didn't work, beat it, get out. But if you're going to use one, you got to call 911 at the same exact time. And it works. It's discipline and it's training and all that other good stuff we talk about.
Have you ever been to, any of you fellas on the panel here today, fires in upholstered furniture that these people thought were out because they used an ABC on it, and it ain't out? You know it's not out. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I've been to those fires.
I wish I could hear Mike.
It's just
You open them up.
it happens frequently for us that people think they put the fire out and they haven't. Again, it's been it's happened frequently. It's happened in a lot of major fires where people think they put it out, and then they're moving. We had one where people got killed. They're moving the couch out of the apartment, open up the doorway, the windows are open, and the airflow, and they end up getting killed in the apartment.
Yes, yes. Ron, could you delve into the rating system and how realistic is it if you say you have a 10 BC extinguisher, that it really truly is 10 square feet? Who does that apply to? A trained operator or an untrained operator?
It's always going to come down to the trained person. There's no doubt about it. And the rating system is pretty good. They've adjusted it over the years, and of course some of the extinguishers, how they operate and what they put in them, they've adjusted a little bit over the years. But it does come down to training. I mean, the guys in the urban centers, like guys like Mike Dugan. Mike, if you can hear me, can you just shake your head up and down? Yes. Okay, because I can't hear you at all, buddy. But I'll let you make it up to me sometime when we're together, and you can just do more talking than me. But when you talk to guys like Mike, and they say the truck companies in New York, when they got up there with the can, they can knock down a whole room of fire if they judiciously use the water in that 2.5 gallon can, just to hold it until the engine got up with a line. Mike, am I right? A good can guy could knock down some fire. So it's about training. That guy that did that the very first time, he probably failed at it, but they kept doing it, and they figured out how to work and putting their finger over the tip of the nozzle, right, Mike? And making a little bit of spray and cooling off the overhead and all that stuff. So it's training. It all comes down to knowing what you're doing. But yeah, if it's a 10 BC, a 40 BC, 150 BC, it'll tell you, it kind of lays out the groundwork, what you can and can't do. And again, I'm going to reiterate, you got to know what you can't do with a portable. That's just more important than what you can do.
Absolutely. And you know what I think we'll do right now, we're going to go right down the line here, and we're going to talk about the training that we give our fire recruits for fire extinguishers. And I'll be the first to say, we used to train them very well when we could use the pits, and we got very good at crossing the streams. The fire would get around one of the nozzles, and you'd come back and you'd work together and you'd sweep as a team. And we were very good at it. But as you say, nobody's using pits anymore. And it just ain't the same with LP gas. So that's our situation here. Sam, what are you doing with your recruits or in-service training? Any training on extinguishers?
We don't really work with the recruits. What we do is when you go through the truck company academy, before you get assigned to a truck, we do a lot of training with the water can. So we'll put them in fire situations, and we expect guys to take the can. If it's a first floor fire and they're going to search above the fire or search adjacent to the fire, we want them to have a can in close proximity with them, just in case it gets up in the walls or they find that it's advanced somewhere. But other than that, I mean, the real problem is this, and it's like any training we do. Our retention level, we're not going to retain everything that we've been taught. And so because we're not allowed to use, couches in live fire situations, we just have to explain to them that you're probably not going to get the thing soaked. So once you get it knocked down with the can, go to the, we advocate going to the bathroom instead of the kitchen sink and filling up a trash can. You can fill up a trash can with 4 times the amount of water, 4 times as fast, and then just go and let it really soak through some of those materials. But again, we're giving them the best training we can. We want them to get in there and search while they have the light, knock the fire back, and then shut the door. But using pallets and straw. So while we're doing the best we can, it's not what it's like in a real fire.
Mike Dugan, what do they do with the FDNY? What kind of training do the firefighters get on extinguishers?
They get limited extinguisher training at the fire academy. They get a class on it. They don't do that much hands-on anymore. And then you go out in the field. And when you're out in the field, the guys show you how to do it. The guys who have been there before. Listen, one of the favorite positions in the FDNY is the can, the 2.5-gallon extinguisher. Okay, it's usually for the new guy, but the senior men love it too because you're closest to the fire. You go in there, and I've seen guys say, and I've said it as an officer, okay, that's enough. Save some of the can, which is always a good idea. You get the fire knocked down, save some, because it's going to start up again. You haven't really extinguished it. Save some of the can. But the other thing I've said to them is leave some for the engine. They're stretching. They want to. You don't want to put it all out, okay? But Sam is 100% correct. If you're searching, you take your tool with you. Our can man carries a 6-foot hook and an extinguisher. Bring them with you. Do not leave it as a door chop. Don't leave it any place. Bring it with you. The only time I've ever instructed people to leave the can is when we go to an industrial or something else, and I think it's an electrical fire. Then I don't want the water there. Leave the can, grab a dry can, grab something else. But it's a company level training to get out in the field and showing the guys how to put their finger over it, how to use the can properly, and again, where to aim the water, what to do, and everything else. I mean, you want to get it at the base of the fire. You don't want to be hitting the flames. You want to put the fire, knock the fire down, get at the burning material, and it's all part of it. And it's what the senior men and good officers are training all of their new people to do.
Could I add one thing to that? And that's when the pressure is out, take the lid off and go ahead and use what's left. There's still some water in there, and go ahead and douse and soak the fuel.
Well, we always carried what I call the ghetto can, Sam. And the ghetto can was 2.25 gallons, not 2.5 gallons, and a lot more air pressure. Okay, guys didn't want to carry more water. You always wanted more air than water. And you're 100% right. You can still get it. And the trash can and filling it up in the bathtub, there's always a garbage can in the bathroom. And you want to make sure you do the right thing with this. And you're 100% right. But the ghetto can was always more air pressure, so you didn't. Because there was nothing worse than running out of air with a lot of water still left in the can.
Well, that's not a problem in Chicago because they have a hand pump, a 5-gallon hand pump, those guys, and they've been using it for well over 100 years at least. And you pump, and it's got a real long hose on it, and you can put a lot of fire out with it. 5-gallon hand pump. And they'll take it and they'll dump it as well. But you see that in the Chicago area. I have been trying to get one of those and give it to my former company here on Miami-Dade. Even if we didn't fill it full of water, just stuck it up there. We could put water in it and go on a trash fire or something that's at a great distance from the apparatus. Jason Holbleman, have you found that if you put a little bit of dish soap or perhaps some Class A foam or a little bit of AFFF in the 2.5-gallon extinguisher, that it gives you a little bit better capability as far as penetrating and clinging?
Yeah, we did. We actually played around with the leftover residual foam and the AFFF, and we would just dump. So we never measured it. It wasn't a science.
Yeah.
We drop a little bit in the 2.5 gallon container, and we actually did some burns. We did some flammable liquids burns, some Class A burns with, and it worked pretty good. It seemed to do a little bit better than the water did. If you aimed it right, the training obviously on the flammable liquids, but it does work, and it's really leftover foam. It's just going to sit in there and get thrown out with the buckets. So we utilized it. And back to the training, we're really fortunate in St. Louis County. Our fire academy in St. Louis County has relationships with Ameren Electric Company, which provides all the electric to a big portion of the St. Louis metro area. And they actually still do burns in pits. They had magnificent fires with all the black smoke. They got to scrub the wires. They've got to do all kinds of stuff with that. And then, so they get a lot of experience, luckily. Now incumbent training, once you get on the job, is a little bit different. And then they also get to go to Spire, which is the natural gas provider. And they get to do a lot of fire extinguisher training with the natural gas props.
Now, so these are industrial firefighters that are training municipal firefighters. Is that right?
Correct.
That's what I like. And I think that there's a disconnect between our brothers in industry, our brothers and sisters in industry, and in municipal fire departments. And I think that there is there's a mutual respect there. I went up to an industrial school sponsored by Factory Mutual in Rome, Georgia, and the people that run that plant are the fires that they would have in the tote containers and in the pits. Their capabilities with hose lines and with extinguishers far surpassed anything I've seen with municipal firefighters. Because, like Ron said, they get a lot of practice.
Bill, if I can jump in here,
they're wonderful.
I can't hear Mike or Jason, and it makes me sad because I love listening to those guys and sharing with them. I can get Sam, but I can't get the other two. But what makes me more sad is I didn't pay attention when I took lip reading in college and I failed that course. It's driving me nuts. Okay, but in any event, when you talk about that municipal industrial interface, I wrote something in fire engineering years ago on that when I was in industry. And what I talked about was the industrial guys reaching out to the municipal guys and saying, "Hey, come with us." And I'm kind of proud that I championed that course at least in my area. I was surrounded by 2 career municipal departments when I was at Merck, and we would invite them to train with us anytime that we can get it. We'd go down and rent the academy for a couple of days, burn the pit, and all that other stuff we used to do. And we used to work side by side with them. And down the road, it paid off. They right on the city of Linden, New Jersey, they had a head-on collision between a tank truck and a box truck on Route 1, U.S. Route 1. And they called us out for mutual aid. And we've done stuff with them before. I mean, everybody knew everybody. That's half the battle. Everybody knows everybody by name, by face, that familiarity. And we're stretching foam lines, and my guys are working with their guys, and we got the fire out in no time. So it was pretty interesting, the fact that we had trained together so many times, invited them into the facility, familiarization tours, showing them our stuff, to the point where we even showed them how to operate our foam truck. We gave them instruction on how to operate our foam truck in case our brigade was light on a given night. Or Sunday, or whatever the case may be. And then we also hung foam calculations in every one of our houses where we had bulk flammable liquids. So we kind of did that together, and it's got to be that way. I've been preaching that forever. The municipal industrial guys got to get together and show each other what they got, and most importantly, train together. That's the key. Do some training.
Jason, that's remarkable what you have, the relationship you have with that private enterprise, and I would like to see more of it. Hey, we're past the halfway mark. I want to mention our sponsor again, Key. That's keyhose.com. The individuals that work for this company are top shelf experienced firefighters that have their heart and their head in the job, and they totally stand behind their product. Their research and development is absolutely superb, and it's reflected in their True ID 2.25 and 2.5-inch hose. Again, if you're in the market for hose, get your hands on the True ID. And if you're not that small increase in diameter does make a big difference. We say, well, we want to flow a lot of water. Well, some point you meet the point of diminishing returns when you're handling hose, and maybe you don't want to flow that much water. Maybe we've overdone it in some respects. We have 2.5-inch lines for that. So in some departments, they're actually downsizing to go to a true ID hose. For instance, our Key Combat Ready is really 1.88 inches. Now we can get a true ID, and I think Captain Mike, could you recall, does the Key FDNY hose, because I know that FDNY uses a special weave of FDNY hose. Is that a true 1.75-inch ID, or does it expand in cross-sectional area?
It expands.
Okay. All right.
We're actually testing the Key hose right now.
Okay.
I don't know where we're at with it, but we have it on a few of our engine companies.
Okay. Good. I can't say enough about it, man. This is what our department uses, and our kink problems are substantially reduced since we're almost all operating with Key Combat Ready. But I take a look at that 2.25. We've already made the big purchase. We're now operating with 2-inch hose with 2.5-inch couplings for our standpipe operation. And that's what works for us. I'm not advocating that anybody do that, but I'm advocating, regardless of how you use your hose or what hose you choose, I'm not advocating a particular size. I'm advocating you better do your homework, and you better find out what works for you with your systems, your pressures, and the volume of fire that you may encounter. Compare compartmented residential structures with wide open office spaces. It's a world of difference, and it's going to influence how much water you're going to need to flow. Jason, any other experiences, negatively or positively, with extinguishers?
Just what Mike and Sam mentioned with the water extinguisher. What we've really found is that incumbent training, we've seen some guys make some mistakes with them, because once you get out of the academy, we don't get that kind of training. We still get to the natural gas place every so often, but the big problems we've seen was most of my volunteer department with those metal fires and trying to get one purple extinguisher to get the job done, and it just isn't enough. And luckily we had a metal fabrication factory or facility that would come out and help us deal with that. But if you don't have those resources, it's going to be tough. And I was telling Mike before we got on, I remember St. Louis City having a huge fire. This was when Savannix was still the chief, and they had to dump water on that fire for days and days and days. And early on, it looks like the 4th of July.
Ron, can you tell us a little bit about the Class K extinguishers that you see in restaurant facilities?
Yeah, I was afraid you were going to bring that up. With the Class K is something new. NFPA decided to create a Class K classification. What happened initially was that what they did was they put the wet chemical that they use in the fixed range hood system into portables, and it works. The wet chemical works well, and as a portable, you get a grease fire in a broiler or on a deep fat fryer, it'll work. The problem is the rating on a Class K is a simple 2B, where we're looking at the old 40 BCs and 60 BCs. It's 2B. So for a long time, places were buying them and hanging them in the kitchen, but the code still required a 40 BC sitting next to it, which I thought was terrific. A lot of codes have eliminated that now. The New Jersey code says if you got 2 Bs in the kitchen, you don't need that 40 BC dry chemical anymore. And I think personally think that's a mistake. The wet chems seem to work okay, but I don't think they're the be all end all, to tell you the truth. A lot of, in New Jersey specifically, 20 years ago, a deputy chief died line of duty from exposure. They had a fire in a Burger King, and it turns out the fire cooked off the air conditioning units on the roof, and that hot Freon gas came rolling out the doors. He got a lung and 96 hours later, just like it says on the MSDS, the phosgene got him, and he died.
Yep.
Yeah. So with that, all the Union County and all the New Jersey companies, they bought the wet chemicals because if they went to a restaurant fire, they wanted to have the advantage. I'm not sure how well they're working when you got 4 deep fat fryers rolling and you got a lot of the broiler and everything else is going. I'm not sure a 2B rated extinguisher is going to do the job. The fixed system at that point should do the job, but as a backup, that little portable with the wet chem, I'm not sure. Nothing punches. I'm going to say it again. Nothing punches a flammable, combustible liquid or a grease in the face harder than a BC rated extinguisher with a high rating on it. It works the best.
Okay, so I'm going to gather then that if you're making a recommendation for get the most for your bang for your buck with an extinguisher for a fire apparatus, it is a large BC rated, something like Purple K then, Ron. I don't want to put any words in your mouth.
Well, at least a minimum 20-pound BC extinguisher, because the ABC for the A fire, you're going to use the water can anyway. I'm thinking.
There you go.
And what happens when you get an ABC multi-purpose dry chemical, you're losing a little bit of the punch on the flammable liquid because they have to put the A portion in there. So I would say BC dry chems and a water can, and you're set. That's Mike Dugan shaking his head. Thank you, Mike.
Excellent point. Because we have the A capability, perhaps we're better off with a BC that has a little bit higher rating. It's an excellent point, Ron. The other thing, Ron, could you comment? There's a controversy in spray booths and in restaurants.
Okay.
You're going to shoot dry chemical up into remove the filters and shoot it up into the ductwork or in the plenum that ultimately goes up into the ductwork and then the Gen Air fan on the roof. Would you restart the exhaust fan if it was off to enhance the movement of that dry chemical up in there? What do they do in industry?
In fact, they had years ago, UL had changed their requirements. They used to have the fan shut down. And then they said, no, leave it on because it'll pull the dry chem up through the ductwork and it'll help extinguish the fire. So the fan stays on. By the time we get to a restaurant, if the kitchen's rolling, the fixed system should have went off already. Okay. And the fan should still be on. And what I tell firefighters, if the fixed system didn't dump for some reason, it's possible that lead fusible ink, if they don't change them enough and they're not complying with the code, that lead link will harden like steel and it'll never go off. So for lack of maintenance, you might pull up and the whole cooking line is rolling. Go in there and pull the manual pull and let the engineered system do its thing. Let it do its thing. The fan should stay on. The fire should go down at that point.
And then, Ron, by code, by design, your gas should be shut off. That's not to say you won't confirm that, but you do have a solenoid valve, a solenoid operated valve. I see.
Yeah, but it depends on what it is, Bill. If it's a gas fed kitchen, there'll be even a mechanical valve that's attached to the same spring loaded head on that wet chemical system. When that fires off, that EMT cable will let go and it'll shut the gas. On an electrical kitchen, it'll hit a shunt trip breaker and shut the electric off. The idea about when they tested these systems, they found that once they dumped whatever they're dumping on top of it, taking the heat off the appliances helps to put the fire out.
What do you think, Ron, about the cartridge extinguisher that departments would be able to fill and service themselves? I mean, most notably would be the Ansel, but there's other ones out there.
The cartridge extinguishers work great. I had a ton of them in industry. They work good. They're a little bit of a pain in the butt. You know, the typical stored pressure works. It's easier and all that, but the cartridges work well. I mean, to me, you can buy, you know, a high-priced Chevy or a high-priced Buick, and it's just kind of the same car. You know, it's a GMC and a Chevy Tahoe, the Yukon and the Tahoe. They're just cousins, you know. But the key is what's in it. And if we're talking flammable liquid punch, we're talking BC all the time.
Have you ever known anybody, Ron, that has gone to the Ansel firefighting school in Marinette, Wisconsin?
I do not.
I wonder if anybody has. I'd like to hear from somebody because that's on my bucket list. I have heard some great things about that, and that is something that I would really like to do. Have any of you guys know anybody on our panel here that has been to that, or maybe somebody could give us a little hashtag here? Are they still performing it? I mean, they've done it for, I don't know, for as long as I can remember being in the fire service, and I've heard reviews, but nothing specific.
What we used to do, Bill, is we ran our own corporate fire schools, because Merck was not only nationwide, it was worldwide. So we'd invite the European community. We have a plant in Germany, Italy, France, Puerto Rico. We'd invite them all in, and our 6 domestic plants. So we'd have 200 of us, and we'd rent the fire academy for a week down in Burlington and burn the pits. So we were using so much dry chem for that week. The pit wouldn't light off after a while. There was too much dry chem in there. And to that end, we had a fire extinguisher company come down with a crew of 2 or 3 just to do refills all day for 4 or 5 days in a row. So we used to run our own corporate schools. Most of the industry run their own corporate schools, or they may send a couple of guys to Texas to the Teaks extension, or to I forget the other place, Teaks, or there's another one. I can't think of it off the top. Maybe Jason knows what we're talking about. But that's really, most of the companies do their own, and we did our own as well. We did our own thing.
Ron, is it true that if you take a stored pressure extinguisher and just give it one shot, that because that you eventually will lose the propellant gas because there's going to be a certain amount of chemical that's going to hold the valve partially open? I mean, we're always told if the seal is broken, this thing could bleed down, even though the gauge is reading properly. As a practical matter, what is the truth of the matter with that, Ron?
What I've seen in my experience is if you just gave it a 2-second shot, that extinguisher, it'll work again in a couple of weeks if you needed it. The thing is that it's what the codes say. Once the seal's off and once you've discharged any of it, it's got to be recharged to its fullest capacity, because there's always that doubt that it could leak down, that it could clog. So once it's broken, you've got a better chance that it's going to work than not. But no one wants to get caught with their drawers down, with something that's code. And you say, well, no, it's all right, we'll be fine. And then something happens. So the answer is get it done. That's it.
Okay. All right. So the BC, and I was going to ask you something else. Oh, alternative to halon. Years ago, we used to use the halon 1211.
Right.
Chlorobromomethane or whatever it is. And the 1301 was in the flooding systems, but right. The 1211 was in extinguishers. Has the industry come up with something, an alternative for the halon 1211?
There are other, they call them clean agents, and the issue they had when they started to do the clean agents, there were 2 issues. There was, unfortunately, for the people who had big halon systems like in their computer rooms, there was no drop-in replacement. We looked at the Great Lakes Chemical Company. They were genius. They called their new stuff FM 200. Had nothing to do with Factory Mutual. They just called it FM 200. It was genius. So everybody thought that was the big deal. But you couldn't just take the empty out the halon tanks and put the FM 200. You needed another 50% worth of tanks for storage and for bulk in order for that to be as effective as halon. The other part, when they tried to put it into portable extinguishers, and we took a couple. I was in industry when this all happened over 10 years ago. My extinguisher guy came to the facility and said, we got the new replacement for halon in portables. I said, all right, bring a bunch of them. We're not going to light a fire in the joint, but we're going to try them and see how they work. And you had to get, it was like CO2, Bill. You had to get right on top of the fire to hit it. It had no reach. The 1211, the key to the success of 1211 was it stayed a liquid as it flew through the air out of the extinguisher.
Yes.
So you could be 30 feet away, and it's coming out and then it would gasify when it hit the fire, and it would work. But the new stuff, you had to be right on top of the fire like CO2. They haven't really improved it to the point where it's like 1211. It's too bad. 1211 was great.
Let me ask you guys.
A lot of fires out with 1211.
I would rather have two big 20-pound dry chemical extinguishers than one 20-pound extinguisher and a big 20-pound CO2. If I've only got so much storage space on the apparatus, I'd rather have two dry chemicals than a CO2. Because as far as for use on a municipal fire department, what's your recommendations or experience with that, Ron, with using CO2s?
The thing about CO2 is you got to get very close. Now, if guys like are wearing gear and a mask, and it's okay if they had to get close, but the average usage is going to be somebody in that facility before we get there. So now that man or woman is going to pick up that CO2 and try to get near that electrical panel, number one. So they got to get close. Number two, large CO2s are traditionally very heavy.
Yes.
Unwieldy. Because we talked about putting them in the labs, in the laboratories, and basically 5-pounders. And what are you doing with 5 pounds of CO2? You might as well walk away. So they became too unwieldy, so we looked for alternative. We ended up going with the small CO2s anyway, because they wanted to get, once the halon went away, they talked about dry chem. So we put dry chem in the hallways of the lab buildings and CO2 in the labs themselves. Here was the problem, Bill. The first fire we had after we made the change, someone grabbed a dry chem out of the hall, went into that lab, put the fire out in the hood, and destroyed every scientific experiment in that room. It's like the old days when the dry chem would go off in a restaurant in the kitchen. That dust and powder would be all over not only the food, but in the dining room and on top of the tables. And it would take that restaurant 3 days to open up again. So it was the same thing. It wasn't working for us in industry. But getting back to two 20-pound BCs on the rig and a water can or two, that does it for me.
You got it, brother. I got a trivia question for our panel here. The first, you never know. You see this? You never know what this crazy old man's going to say. So, no, this is a good one. Ron, you're going to like this, and I have a feeling you're going to get the answer to it.
Maybe.
What was the first halon fire extinguisher? I think it was called halon 1040 or halon 104. Had a 4 in it, 4 carbons. Anybody know? They quit using them long time ago.
Oh, that was carbon tetrachloride, wasn't it?
You got it. You got it. All right. Ron, you win the booby prize.
Okay.
Not sure what that is, but whatever it is, you win the booby prize. Carbon.
Bill, you got. Do you know why we got out of the carbon tet business?
Yes, we do, because what you said about that Freon, the same thing, correct?
Yes.
It's to inhale it in its natural form is not good. In fact, my dad used to tell me they used to use it in dry cleaning plants, and people would end up getting punch drunk.
Right.
But the real hazard, you alluded to it, or Captain Mike did. When it hits a hot surface, it thermally decomposes into halogenated acid gases like hydrogen fluoride.
Yeah, Halon 1301 that we use the total flooding systems. And Mike, there were thousands of those systems all over Manhattan in the computer rooms in the high rises. When I was in fire prevention in the 80s, I probably approved half of them when I was out in the field. There's millions of pounds of Halon in tanks in New York City. And the problem with 1301, at 950 degrees, it starts to break down into its individual chemicals. Just basically what Mike said about hitting the hot surface. At 950, okay, 1301 is chlorotrifluoromethane, chlorine, fluorine, and methane. And together, they have a little synergistic relationship. They're kind of cozy in a sleeping bag together. But you start breaking it down at 950, they go back into their individuals. You're not wearing a mask, you're going to get sick. You're going to get sick. Carbon tet was the same way.
Carbon tetrachloride. Yeah. You still see them in some old cars. I mean, they're beautiful. A little brass thing like this. And you unlock the key handle. And
Yep.
So, well, you know what? You're showing your age, Ron. Also, the glass bulbs, weren't they carbon tetrachloride? You throw them in, or fire would break the bulb.
They call them fire grenades. Now to recollect, they were probably $2. Now they're a collector's item. They're worth a couple of hundred, because it was actually, a lot of them were in real crystal glass, like Waterford crystal. So now they're collector's items and cost a lot of money. You'll go on eBay, a couple of $100. But the glass, and then I'd seen in the 90s, they were trying to market. Well, I had one actually. It was just a ceramic, like a cat or a dog or a panda bear, and there was dry chemical in there, so you could go and throw it into the bedroom and run, that kind of thing, you know. So they're always trying something new.
Yeah.
Got to give it a shot, right?
We're going to close this out here pretty soon. Chief Jason Hovelman, any closing thoughts? Any words of advice on extinguishers there, Jason Hovelman?
No, and you may have to pass this around to Ron. He can't hear me, but we did a room in Sullivan. It's been several years ago now, but they had a computer room that they wanted to protect without the sprinklers, and they had canisters, and they were UL listed. They had all the ratings, and they were approved because I had to do a lot of research on them, but I can't remember the name. And they had them strategically located along the walls in that room instead of water extinguishers and halon. And it was they had like a link on them, and when the room got so hot or detected so much smoke, they activated, and it filled up that little computer room that had rated walls, and that was how they protected that room. It was really interesting. I've never seen it since.
Captain Mike, any closing thoughts there, sir?
Yeah, the one thing I want to say, Bill, because we talked about it a little earlier, is on the municipal side and the industrial side working together. You have to form that relationship, because I've seen a lot of guys go into municipal places and they put water on their machines or on their electronics, and they screw up a local business. And on the industrial side, you also have to work with the fire department, because if they're coming there every week, sooner or later they're going to get tired and pissed off if they go into a fire, which I have also seen happen. And they come in and the chief says, no, we're not going to do it your way. We're going to do it my way. And we're going to hit it with the deck gun because we're tired of your crap. So, again, it's a two-way street, and we have to build those relationships, as Ron said.
I can't agree more. And you're really missing out. We're going to be on the losing end if you're not enabling yourself and approaching private industry and see what they have to offer. It may be you're really missing out. They may have extinguishing agents, especially something like a refinery or some type of chemical company. You know that they're going to have not only foam capability, but they're probably going to be more capable at using that foam than we would because of their training and their background. We're going to let Ron have the final say. So before that, Sam, brother.
I think this has been a very informative hangout. Like I told you in the email when you proposed the topic, you know, extinguishers isn't something I'm really strong at. So I appreciate it. I've learned a lot today. And at the same time, you know, like those hydrotetrachloride balls or chlorine balls in the ceiling, we'll still find those in Midtown occasionally at fires when we go to hook the ceiling. So they're still out there, and it's just another reminder to keep your air packs on.
Yep. I'm gonna let Ron have the final say, but let's give a final shout out and a thank you to our sponsor, Key Hose. It's keyhose.com. Again, take the key challenge, man. Try to kink this stuff. You can't kink it. Okay, it has amazing kink resistance. And remember, I told you we were doing this at 60 pounds hydrant pressure. So thank you. And Ron, you exceeded everybody's expectations.
Well, thank you, sir. And you know what? I'm a little disappointed because you were talking about not being able to kink the hose, but I thought you were kinky all this time. So
I was kinky, okay, but I've kept that down to a minimum there because you never know when the sensors are going to be listening.
That's true. So we'll keep it above. We'll keep it above.
But this is no BS. When I decided we're going to do extinguishers, I immediately thought of you because of your previous articles that you've written. And by the way, you need to write something else because there's nothing on extinguishers that I've seen in the last recent years, Ron. So I would encourage you with all that free time you have on your hands that just write down a few notes on a napkin or something and send it into fire engineering. And we'll dress it up. We'll give it a makeover.
And listen, Bill, you know as well as I do, the staff over at Fire Engineering, they've been dressing us up forever. You know that, right?
Yeah, extreme makeovers. They make us look like Shakespeare's, don't they?
No kidding, boy. I tell you.
Yeah.
A couple of things.
Go ahead, Ron.
A couple of out of the box things. I did an article a few years ago for the magazine called "Getting Out of the Tactical Box and Smashing the Tactical Box," and in it, what I said was for limited staffing fire departments, like I'm in now. You know, you pull up to a house, you got fire out the front window. Maybe it's a bedroom or the bay window of the living room. Okay, the engine's trying to get a line. Maybe the truck just pulled up behind it. Take a 20-pound BC dry chem, send the guy in the truck over to the window and dump that whole BC dry chemical in that window where the fire is coming out. Because of the hydrocarbon-rich environment now in the houses and in the buildings, that BC dry chem should have a punch, at least give you knockdown in that room. So it's something a little bit out of the box. I know Mike's got stomach pains listening to this, using a dry chemical extinguisher in a structure fire. But that's all we talk about is the occupancies are hydrocarbon-rich. It's all plastics. It's high heat. It's this. Trying a BC dry chem in the window just to knock it down while they're getting the line ready and getting the water supply.
It makes sense, Ron, because you have the intermingling of free radicals and fuel vapors in a gaseous aerosol form.
Mm-hmm.
Mixing with the dry chemical. I mean, that's the perfect combination for those two chemicals to interact.
And almost everything in that living room, it's hydrocarbon based. The carpet fibers, the foam in the seats, all that stuff. The plastic computer that's sitting on the desk. So it's something to look at. Maybe something to try. Maybe at a training facility. The other out of the box thing that we actually did in industry was we built a high-rise flammable liquid building, a process building. It was a high-rise because the roof was 133 feet from the grade. So we're talking about how we're going to get foam upstairs. And they're running 4-inch lines of flammable liquids through this building, acetone, methanol. So the first things my guys said to me is, we need a towel ladder with a foam system on it, which they make. And the refinery down the block had 3 of them. So we looked at that. And then I said, all right, once the building is up and the standpipe, of course, they got to build with the building, floor by floor. Once they completed it and it was still a shell, we took the foam truck out. We put a finished foam line into the connection, and we made foam at the top floor using the standpipe system. We send foam up through the standpipe system. It works. Then we said, well, what about sprinklers? So we took a couple of pans down to the local fire academy, to the Class A burn building. They always have like 2 or 3 sprinkler heads to show the guys what it looks like. We put the pans in there, about 1 inch deep, acetone. We lit them off. We let them pre-burn for 2 or 3 minutes, and we put a line into the connection, foam line, through standard, regular sprinkler heads, nothing special. They're not aerating. Put the fire out in the pans in 1.5 minutes. Done. So foam in the sprinklers, foam in the standpipe, dry chem in the living room, just getting out of the box and using, just trying something different, whatever works. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you. And don't be afraid to try new things. And like you say, think out of the box. Our time is up. And Ron, God bless you, man.
Thank you, buddy. You too.
Keep you safe, and God bless the rest of you fellas. Safe travels if you're going anywhere on this summer for you and your family. And until next month, stay safe and keep your head and your heart in this job. So long.
Take care, guys. Be safe.